Hey guys, good to be back.
Hey, Anand.
Good
Yeah,
morning
Anand.
again. Anand, I mean, what Akshay was describing about pre-seed investing, how much of that do you agree with, and what's your take? You're an active angel investor, and I mean, of course, with the fund as well.
I missed a little bit of the segment, but I would say the last part that I heard, I really like that. I think even connecting that to backing the Lovable founder before they had what is now a great product, I think sometimes these stories are not linear to just kind of stick with the founder and the story as it evolves. Because I think that it also gives the founder some malleability as they're building the company. Sometimes I feel like the founders are extremely clear about the vision and what they're malleable about is the tactics, right? My sort of favorite example of that is the first time I met the founders of No Broker. I was visiting their office in Bangalore, and I used to live in Delhi. I had a lot of trouble finding their office, right? I was like borderline frustrated, and I was saying, why can't you make your office a little bit more discoverable, right? You can put your sign up. And they're like, we're so sorry, but all the brokers have gotten together and they've broken into our office multiple times. And they thought that destroying our computers would, get us to stop building No Broker, right? And so there, like they had to shift their tactics. They had to be in a nondescript office. They had to hide out for a while, but they didn't give up on the vision. And the vision has always been the same. It's a very high tech approach to bringing supply and demand together in a peer to peer marketplace, right? So sometimes I think the vision is really clear from day one and it's the tactics that are malleable, but sometimes the vision itself is malleable, right? Like we see so many examples. The most notable one that all of us probably have heard the story is the Slack story, right? It started as a gaming company and then it became the de facto communication platform in businesses today, allowing for a little bit of malleability. I don't know, Akshay, perhaps the fact that you have sort of an exposure to music and other ways, because when I think of collaboration and people say, what's a great example? I use the same example that Steve Jobs used to use, which is every musician in the Beatles is not the best musician ever, but the Beatles are the best band, right? There's something to be said about like allowing for that malleability, both
Hmm.
within the founding group as well as between the founders and the investor.
One typically hears versions of this, Anand, which is like one version is you have to be able to serve in order to lead. And then the second version is that the best founders are, as Akshay was also saying, disagreeable. They have a chip on their shoulder. They're not always very easy to get along with. And so you've, of course, had a ton of experience. How do you feel about this?
I mean, I think there's something to be said about that archetype, and I think where that comes from is there's this heuristic that I've heard from a lot of investors that I really like, which is the best founders tend to have like one leg in the past and in the present and one leg in the future. And I think the fact that they are somewhat disagreeable and hard to get along comes from the frustration that they've already lived in the future, and they're like quite impatient to like bring everybody there. And if somebody is like dragging their feet and will not move fast and wants to work from home all the time and all of that stuff, right? Like it's frustrating because they're already living in the future and they're like, I want to get there faster. And by the way, that's where I would put a lot of these debates is like, do you have an impatience for that future once it's so clear how you can go from here to there? Because I think like in every industry, going from the present to the future, if that's like something that's really important to you, it's not a straight line, right? And sometimes you see this through line to go from the present to the future in any space. And at that point, if you don't like ramp up execution insanely, you could lose that moment, right? And then you wait for the next moment, but you don't want to lose those moments. So, I think that's where a lot of the frustration comes from, sometimes for founders. And I don't think it's, a lot of people waking up and saying, I want to be disagreeable. I think it's that they don't want to compromise on
Yeah,
that, taking people from the present to the future.
it kind of goes back to what Anand, I don't know if you joined at this point, but Dhruv had asked me what we look for in some of the founders we work with. And it kind of goes back to exactly what you mentioned, which is they have this sense of urgency about them, right? They see the future, they want to execute really quickly. It's a nonlinear path and they know that, but they want to iterate as fast as possible to get there. Yeah, it basically aligns exactly what you just mentioned.
Akshay, by the way, I found the line that I'd goofed up earlier, which is irrational people doing rational things or rational people doing irrational things.
All right. So
Interesting.
coming back to stuff that's more topical. So on this show, we've actually covered so many headlines. Every day, there's a fill in the blank between 10 billion to 100 billion is passed around in the capex world of AI. What are your views on what's happening? Like it's very hard to keep up with this circular economy that's driving this, I mean, insanely heavy capex into the world of AI, and most of it revolving around open AI. And you're involved, both of them. I mean, Anand, you're now closely involved as an operator as well in the world of AI. You recently raised from Khosla as well yesterday. And Akshay, of course, has a view into the world of AI across the world. So give us your individual opinions on this.
The idea of finding design partners for a new product that you put together, and as a result, doing a deeper deal where there's vendor financings involved and there is deeper collaboration involved, especially when you're looking to sort of create a certain amount of capacity that you can fill up with the demand that you have. I think of OpenAI also as less of a LLMs and model company and more of a consumer subscription company at this point, right? So there is a very clear business model, and the models are differentiating themselves also, where Anthropic is focused on code generation, like that's what they are fantastic at and have developed a niche around. And different models are monetizing in different ways. And then there are folks who are purely monetizing in a B2B API access way, which honestly seems to be the least leveraged way in terms of business model durability, because the model rates, they're still declining and there's a lot of discounting and so on. I think the reason people are a little bit worried is because most people in the investing world operate through pattern matching, and they're comparing what's going on to like the internet build out, right? When optical build out was happening 20 years ago in the US, and there was a lot of these vendor financing deals that were done by the vendors to the people that bought it without necessarily the demand for it, right? I mean, ultimately, the internet grew to a point where all that demand was lit up and all the spare capacity was lit up, but it was not done in a way that those vendors could recover the investments that they had done. The most notable bankruptcy being WorldCom back in the day, for those who are like going back in history. So I think it's probably bringing up those memories for people who are part of that. But I do think it's different in the sense that the demand seems extremely real. The value of these capabilities that are built are extremely real. And so the question is just kind of, is it about timing? I think what is also happening is it will create a culture of haves and have-nots. There are people who get these jobs, are in these companies, build out these startups, but there will be like disaffected folks, stakeholders in our universe. You think of the human agents in a contact center, right? But that you can apply that into every sector which is got a meaningful automation through AI. Builders of these companies have to take a multi-stakeholder approach to kind of think about what is the journey of each of their stakeholders, right? Not just the investors and the founders, but also these other stakeholders like the human agents. And I'm sure there's an analogy in other sectors as well. I think that disaffection is probably driving and will already drive, will continue to drive some of the misalignment between different parties. So that's probably what's going on. But I think it is mind blowing, right? Like especially the speed of the AI cycle is definitely like if you blink, you'll miss like a couple of revs of the cycle. And so that is definitely it's fun for those of us like in it and have seen these platform shifts. But it can also be a little bit like it's like driving at 150 miles all the time. It can be a little bit overwhelming.
And the numbers
And
are
so we're
crazy.
seeing all of that.
And the numbers are crazy, and it's the same names like popping up here and there, at least on the hardware side, like Nvidia, AMD's come up now, warrants, OpenAI has warrants in AMD as well. So it's all fascinating.
Yeah.
Akshay, what's your macro perspective on this whole thing?
Yeah, just on your last point, Utsav, it kind of reminds me of this interesting tweet I saw of this Japanese term called keiretsu, where you have all these large companies in Japan that have intertwined interests in each other and they become too big to fail. So to your point on Nvidia and AMD and everybody kind of working with each other, it does seem like we're moving in that direction. To what Anand was saying earlier, look, I think at a high level, it is a massive platform shift, right? I would argue there was this term that Bezos used way back in the day before he started Amazon about the internet and how he views it more as electricity that just kind of will go everywhere eventually in every nook and corner of the economy. And AI is the internet on steroids, right? So I do think it will seep into every different sector and vertical, and a few years out, it'll just be commonplace. You don't even need to have AI in your name anymore. It just would be part of your product and service. So I think the main theme, what we're seeing here is, to Anand's point, and he's seen this build out before in past cycles, but I just think it's people don't want to be left behind. And I think there is a gap that exists, but the demand is real. It's just about timing, as Anand said. And I think that it's the build out we're seeing and the investments we're seeing in conjunction with a lower cost of capital, because investors are willing to pay a lot of money to these companies and premiums on valuation multiples to companies that do these deals, that suddenly things also look cheaper in hindsight, right? If you think about, once you announce these deals, you get tens of billions in market cap overnight. So cost of capital also plays a role, I think, in announcing these deals and going forward with it. Yeah, all said and done, it's exciting. It's a great time to be a founder, a venture investor for sure, because the upside of these companies is incredible. The psychological barrier of 1 trillion has been passed several times already. So it's an interesting time to be a tech investor, but it's a good time. And there is definitely a part of me and everybody, I'm sure, that feels a bit nervous. But I would say still net positive for me personally, given the demand we're seeing and how these products are changing.
All right. Akshay, thank you so much. We can go on for longer. We'll love to have you back on the show as well.
Absolutely.
It's a Friday.
Good to see you guys. Take care.
Cheers.